Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by the award-winning NordVPN. I've been using Nord for years now because it secures my internet traffic and keeps my data private, especially when traveling or on public Wi-Fi. NordVPN has servers in 60 countries, does not log your data, unlocks Netflix and other geographic restrictions on entertainment content, and has a 30-day money-back guarantee. To get the best deal on a subscription, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com/NordVPN or use the promo code BTFuture. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Jessie Draper. She's the founding partner at Halogen Ventures. Jessie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Halogen Ventures, and to be fair, I've pretty much seen majority of the stuff that you've done in your past. So maybe before we get into Halogen, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in Northern California in kind of the heart of Silicon Valley before It was this Hollywoodized version of the, suburb that I grew up. And, I'm a fourth generation investor. I'm the first female in the line.
Very cool.
But, growing up, I really, truly, all I knew was technology and startups and how that worked. And I grew up around incredible entrepreneurs. But I didn't think I could be one of them.
How come?
Because I did not see, I just didn't see any women around me who were running companies. So I saw a lot of incredible men, and I love men. But I just, I was frustrated by that. And so I didn't think I could go into technology.
Interesting.
So I, when I think back and it's like, you're a little kid and you have role models, and I would look up and I was like, who are my role models? And of course, my mom and dad are role models.
Sure.
My mom raised 4 children, and then but I realized my aunt, who was a very well-known actress in the 80s. Her name was Draper. She was on a show called 30-something that's actually coming back on Netflix soon, which is cool.
That's awesome.
It's fun. I was like, oh, that's what women do. Because that was someone close to me as like a little, child who I was like, oh, that's like, she's working. And that, so I thought being an actress was a traditional job for a woman, which is hilarious now looking back.
Sure.
And so I kind of went into entertainment because I thought, oh, well, that's what I understand a woman can do. Ultimately, I actually feel like I had great success as an actress, considering how difficult that profession is. I was on a Nickelodeon show. I was in quite a few movies, and and through that, I started realizing, okay, I'm auditioning. I'm taking all this time to audition. I go to these cattle calls. I wait 5 hours. They don't even ask your name. It's like brutal. And I was like, I can be a lot more productive. And then I had, my dad in my ear constantly being like, how are you going to make this a business? And, I was just really, brought up to think that way and think as an entrepreneur. So I ultimately combined these two kind of passions of mine and created what I believe was the first technology talk show in 2008. And it was silly and fun. And, I do think it was the first because I had incredible guests like Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, and no one cared. And it was so early in the Google days. And it was so funny. And it was like early days of digital distribution. And I was trying to figure out the business model because no one had quite figured it out. We did deals with like Mashable and Forbes and got the show out there wherever we possibly could. Started getting millions of views on video screens like in airports and hotels and fast food restaurants. I mean, any screen I could find, I would do a distribution deal with them. And then we ultimately took it to television. We're nominated for an Emmy. And through that show, for the first 2 seasons, I was interviewing great entrepreneurs, but they were all men. And so I was like, I'm realizing there's a major issue here, which is like, one, women like the little girl in me need to see women running technology companies. And so I made an initiative after 2 seasons to interview women in technology. And I put out this like bat signal, and they came in flocks. It was crazy. And I'd be pitched just all the time, like, Jesse's looking for women in tech. And I'm forever grateful to Jen Hyman from Rent the Runway and Rebecca Minkoff and the Guilt Group girls, because they made it okay for Sheryl Sandberg to come on my show. She came on before she'd even written Lean In. Wow. And that made it okay for then Jessica Alba and Mark Cuban, and the show just took off.
That's amazing.
And then we moved to TV. So I kind of went through that, and I realized I could help with this women issue in 2 ways. And so sometimes companies would pitch the show, and I'd say, hey, you're too early for the show. Love what you're doing. Like, can I write you just a $5,000 check, $1,000 check, literally like whatever I could afford at the time. I didn't have, very much capital.
Okay.
And I used, that track record actually went really well for me. I had a 25x return in less than 18 months on the secondary market. And I used that track record then to raise my first fund, and we're now on our second fund.
Yes,
and we have about 55 companies, and they all have a female in the founding team. We have 3 male CEOs, so I'm always like, we love men. There just have to be women in the executive team.
No, I think that makes like a ton of sense, right? It would be probably really tricky to find like an entire female team. I'm sure there's out there, and like that's awesome. But if you just tried to focus on that, it'd probably be really difficult, right?
Yeah.
Fair. And so Halogen was basically, that was you just started handing out 5, 10, like small amounts of money, which transitioned into Halogen Ventures. Is that correct?
I mean, I was just handing it to whoever walked in my door. I was just like, here's $1,000.
I don't even care if you have a business idea. Just figure it out.
No, don't bother showing me your deck. I would just start seeing these great companies. And when they kind of blew my mind in different ways, like I saw the Skim when they only had 5,000 email addresses, and now, they have 7 million daily readers. I saw Carbon 38, which is now an international athleisure marketplace that Foot Locker owns a piece of. And these companies, and 2 of those companies, I wrote these little checks to, and 2 sold last year for $100 million.
Congrats, that's huge.
And thank you. It is huge, and it's such a gamble. I think when people today, I kind of feel like everyone wants to invest, and I encourage everyone to invest and learn how to invest. But I think when you're in venture, like the best thing you can do is invest in a fund if you're learning, because when you are making these angel investments, you have to assume a certain percentage is going to go under, because if it's early stage venture capital, it's like the riskiest asset class, and it's literal gambling. Like, you're meeting people, you do as much diligence as you can, you take a look at their deck, you do a light background check. But I have seen the coolest companies come out of prison. So, you can only do so much diligence on an early stage company. And we have a great formula now, but you really, we ask for we have like 100-item checklist. But I think when you think about investing, you should be like, I want to invest this much. And if you do want to do private market investing, you should divide that by, 10 or 20 and do smaller investments and see how those go. And then they're always going to come back and ask you for more. So you might divide that in half again and think, okay, well, what if I have to follow on? And so you look at it as your own little fund, because you don't want to throw it all into just one business, because it's like if your friend starts a restaurant, like, do you want to invest in a restaurant? If you do a quick Google on a restaurant, that is like the worst investment you could ever make. But if your friend's like, hey, I'm starting a restaurant group, they're going to launch like 5 to 10 restaurants. Like, that's a much better bet, because it's less likely that they'll all go under.
Smart.
still possible.
Yeah, no, that's actually interesting. And I'm glad you called it gambling, because I've said that to other investors before and they get almost so offended by that. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter how like you can have the best process in the world, but you're still basically taking a complete chance on it, which is also called gambling.
Oh,
And I don't even
complete.
think that's
Yeah, it's totally gambling.
and it's not, I don't
In
mean that in a
early stages
negative way
gambling.
though, right? Like you're
Yeah.
basically taking a chance on somebody. Like you believe in them enough to give them money. Sure, you can call it gambling, taking a chance, whatever you want, but like you are doing that. And it's amazing that you address that. I love that.
Well, yeah, because you look at it like, here's what we do. I'm going to pretend it's an art. I'm going to pretend I'm an expert. I'm going to pretend all these things. And like, I do have a great track record. We've had many exits.
Sure.
We've returned a lot of money, but it's, we haven't returned all of the money yet. We're getting there. We're very close. But it's a 10-year lifespan, just
Right.
for the record. But you look at it, I'm going to pretend I'm this like perfect artist. I think the VCs who like pretend they know exactly how to pick all the winners, like that's probably the worst VC to invest in. Like you have to look at it and say, okay, here's like, now we have 55 companies. So I do have some good pattern recognition in terms of founder behavior and just numbers and EBITDA and how quickly a company might scale in certain verticals. But I'll go through our like 100-item diligence checklist. Then my lawyer goes through another 100 items. And then at the end of the day, I'm literally like, do I feel good about this? Yeah, I feel good about this. Like because at the end of the day, it's a gut check. If you have a bad feeling about this person, even if all the numbers check out, like why would you do that deal?
Fair. Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you, but I think a lot of people still make that deal. Or try to.
And then they end up in a lawsuit with the founder or something. I don't know. Who knows? A lot of weird things happen.
Sure. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into Halogen Ventures, though. You guys may invest in kind of female-focused companies, C-level kind of type things, and you mentioned this 100 checklist or item checklist, but what else do you kind of look for? Is there certain verticals that these companies need to be in, or what do you guys look for?
I feel like, what if I was like, we only invest in like companies that help animals? I wonder if that's a vertical. Like, I feel like today everyone has some sort of vertical they're focused on. Okay. We do focus on different industries, but we are consumer technology as a whole. And I'm just like, it's funny. You've probably seen a lot too, just in terms of what niches people are focused on. And yeah. I do think it's really important to be focused even as a consumer tech investor. Like people call me, they're like, Jesse's looking for women and she's looking for consumer technology. So people know what to send me. But then there's people who, the majority of investors will say like, I'm industry agnostic, I'm stage agnostic. And to me, that's not a strategy because one, I co-invest with hundreds of investors. Yeah. And I'm never going to think of you if you say that because I'm going to be like, do you do hardware? I can't remember. And then I just kind of will move on to the funds I know have a focus, you know? Gotcha. But so we do consumer tech, and then within consumer technology, that was probably like more of an answer than you needed. But we do within consumer tech. I think as a venture capitalist, you have to look 10 years out, and so we have like a couple verticals within consumer tech that, based on the data we've collected over the last few years, we see huge opportunity in those 10 years, and that's data we collect, you know, from bankers or just trends in the ecosystem that we've collected based on the deal flow we see. Because, you know, you have to think 10 years out. In 10 years, we want to sell it for $1 billion. What do we need in 10 years? It's very different from what we need tomorrow.
Right. Sure. So are you looking to always sell? Would you potentially think of IPO, or does it really depend on the company?
I would love an IPO. I do see some in our portfolio that will probably go public. Okay. That's much less likely. Like if you look at the statistics, it's just much less likely. So it's you know, I wish I know one data point that, but I kind of look at it within funds. Like I think, you know, people have way less IPOs than they do have acquisitions.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
By like, you know, 1 to 40 basically.
No, that makes sense. So For people that maybe don't understand the 10-year life cycle, do you want to maybe just quickly cover that? Because I think it's actually really interesting, and I'm curious to also get your take on that.
Yeah, it's you invest in a fund. So basically I raise a pool of capital from a whole bunch of investors, and they've given me the rights and permission and trust me with it to essentially choose the best deals and invest. And that is typically it's a 7 to 10 year lockup, meaning your money, you won't see any money for 7 to 10 years.
Right.
The good news is in consumer, we are seeing exits more like 4 to 5 years out, which is great. But you should just assume you will get a return, but it will be down the road. However, as a fund manager, like we've distributed capital over just like 2 years, and you can do that. You can choose to hold on to it and reinvest it, or you can distribute it. We still feel like we're proving ourselves, so we want to distribute any dollar we make to our investors. So there's different ways of going about that.
Okay, interesting. No, that's very cool, right? And I think the other thing too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that the industry of startups now is kind of mature to the point where, sure, companies still get bought after a year or two, but it usually takes 7 to 10 years for a company to get to a point where they can be acquired for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. Is that fair to say, or is that too much of a generalization?
No, I think that's totally fair to say. And the reason we have a 7 to 10 year lockup is exactly what you said. It takes that long to grow a $1 billion business. And when I think about returning capital to my investors, like when we map it out and put together the model, we have to invest in $1 billion markets, and we hope that many of them will sell for $1 billion. And I don't discredit or discount $100 million markets, but if you plan for the $1 billion markets, you'll have some nice, $500 million exits in there too. But the return needs to be great enough that you can return the capital many times over in order to make a return to all of your investors. And so you need to think in $1 billion terms versus like, oh, this will be a nice $5 million business. That's not something that a venture capitalist would be interested in investing in, because the model for return it doesn't work.
Right. Interesting. So at what stage do you guys like to put money in? It probably really depends, but where's your kind of sweet spot?
Early. We are risky early capital investors. We sometimes are the first institutional money in. We get in sometimes at a $3 million valuation. We like to see a product because it's consumer focused. I do love seeing like $1 million of revenue or some kind of traction. Okay. But sometimes it's a hardware company and they need capital to even get their product off the ground. And so we have invested pre-product. For us, that's like the best model for return. So we do that, and that's what's worked for us.
Interesting. So just to be clear, they don't need to be generating revenue for you guys to invest.
I like $1 million in revenue, but yes, there's certain cases, like we had a company that was a hardware business that, they had the first MVP, but they couldn't.
Got you.
They were still basically pre-product, and they couldn't order the first shipment to sell. And, we had to, I thought it was a really unique opportunity, really, really great company, never seen one before. And so that was, something like a scenario. And they had data proving there was a need. So just as long as we can see some traction, it doesn't necessarily have to translate to dollars, especially if it's like disruptive and something unique. It's not always like cut and dry like a fashion business.
Right. No. And why I ask it again is I find like a lot of venture capitalists will say, yeah, we're early stage, but you need to have like $500,000 or 500, and we won't even touch you unless you have that kind of money. That's what, so like for you guys to be, I think you guys potentially get better opportunities because of you're willing to basically really gamble on those kind of early ideas, right?
Yeah.
It's actually probably more fun for you guys too.
Oh, it's so fun. And also, you're one of the first investors in. And so you're kind of along for the full ride and the full
Yeah.
life cycle. And you're one of their first calls, regardless of how big they get, because you were their first network. And you've seen the whole trek. So, yeah, it's very fun. I mean, I feel so grateful to do what I do. I think it's an amazing, you're just constantly mind blown by the ideas people are coming up with. And you're like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. It's like there's just so many incredible technologies coming out daily.
Sure. No, 100% agree. So do you guys try to stay West Coast? Are you kind of region agnostic, or where do you guys like to invest?
We love to invest all across the country. I'd
Okay.
say the majority of our deals currently are in San Francisco, LA, and New York, but we have one in Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, and we're actually diving more into cities across the country as our deal flow grows and grows and grows. So and women are starting companies everywhere. So it's been really great. The cool thing about investing in women as like our thesis as a moneymaker, it makes an impact, but it's actually like there's data that says, women raise half as much money and double the return. We we get a really interesting pool of entrepreneurs, and it's off of this traditional Silicon Valley path of the Stanford, Harvard graduate. It's like we look for women, and because we looked for women, we have over 50% minority-led companies now,
Wow.
just because we were looking for the best businesses. And, when you go off of the traditional path, you find a new magic pool of treasure.
Sure. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think it's, well, I guess I don't know how to word this question like properly, but is it getting better for women in technology?
I think it's getting better. The data I see that I'm excited about, it's getting better. It's not there. There's not enough venture dollars going to women. There's
Sure.
not enough female investors too. And I think that makes a difference. And then the biggest issue is really at the LP or the limited partner level. So those would be my investors.
Okay.
The institutional investors, like the pension funds and the endowments, those are all run by significantly older gentlemen who, in some cases, had never seen a woman before when I walked into their offices running a company. And so there's things like that where it's like that's really where it needs to change. And then I think we'll see a little better sort of equality between women and men in terms of business and wealth. But it's getting better. I think what I love is we're seeing firsthand incredible data on women. We're seeing that they raise less money and they're profitable faster. We're seeing that diverse teams literally breed success. PitchBook just did a study about how women actually exit a year earlier than male-run teams. And for me, it's really about diversity of all sorts. I think I don't know, we're very inclusive. I like to make sure we have well-balanced teams. If I have an all-female board, I want to make sure we add a qualified male. I think we need each other. And so I think that's just where I look at it. And I want down the road for women to not only, create wealth and be the billionaires of the future, but also like invest in women, because there's still so much opportunity there, from breast pump companies to beyond, that is not getting the funding it should, because they're multi-billion-dollar opportunities.
No, I 100% agree. And sometimes, like, just obviously being a male myself, like, it would be really hard for me to create like a female focused product without at least
Without
having
a woman.
Yeah. And like, so it always blew me away how some companies in the past were basically building these female products, but without even having a female involved. And it was just like, what are you guys doing? Right.
I mean, the worst industry truly for that doesn't make any sense to me is fashion.
Sure.
Women make 80% of purchasing decisions in households, and like specifically in fashion, it's like we know women shop more than men do,
Sure.
just in general. but men run all of the biggest fashion companies. So I think that's really interesting. And some of the wealthiest individual men are in the fashion business. So I think that's sort of interesting and can be disrupted. And I think there's big opportunity there, and among other industries.
No, I 100% agree with you. I love the fact that people like yourself that are really trying to make like big change in this, because I think too, just including people from different cultures and backgrounds, even on your team, no matter not like even outside of gender, is the fact that you can get so much extra insight from just like, just getting their thoughts about something, right? And it's mind blowing how different something can be represented or thought of in another part of the world that you would never even think about.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like everyone grows up differently, everyone has a different kind of culture in their lives and a different kind of perspective. And that adds to any product being created.
I 100% agree with you. It's interesting. Like, just I've been in the software space kind of on the design side for a couple decades now. And I've been at startups and kind of sold startups before. And it's interesting because just going to different people on your team from different backgrounds and saying like, what do you think of this? Like, what does this mean to you? How does this look and feel for you? Or like, if we try to translate it to another language, or you read it from right to left instead of left to right, like, is it readable? Does it make sense to you? Like, and as somebody that basically only speaks one language, English, I can't really even be the best judge of like, if in another language that reads from right to left and the interface works, like I could take my best guess. It seems to work, but you need somebody that actually knows, right? To just even give you proper feedback on some of that stuff.
Yeah. And I think about it too. And, like we'll invest in a luxury market. Okay. And I really love products that appeal to everyone.
Sure.
So, I'll say to the CEO, hey, have you thought of, launching another product within this company that is affordable to everyone? Or like how, the best companies have a product that is affordable to everyone, and especially in consumer. And so I think about it that way, where it's like, okay, you're catering to this one individual. Like, let's think even bigger and figure out how to cater to everyone. And I think, if you grew up one way, you may only understand that consumer instead of thinking about all of them. And so I think you should build your team accordingly and figure out who can poke holes in your business, luxury or not. And it only makes it better.
100%. Today's show is brought to you by FreshBooks, an all-in-one small business invoicing and accounting solution. I've been using FreshBooks for over a decade to send estimates for time and expense tracking, sending invoices, and collecting payments online. Then at tax time, I just generate a report that can be sent off to an accountant. To get a free trial of FreshBooks, please go to buildingthefutureshow.com/FreshBooks. So I'm curious to know, how involved or kind of hands-off are you guys, or does it really depend on the company you guys are investing in?
Oh my gosh, such a good question, because too involved? Like, I think I'm too involved. No, okay. It's just like in the early stages, they call you for everything. So I joke that we're the 24-hour hotline, and I feel like I try to be as helpful and involved as I can. We don't take a ton of board seats, okay, because we just don't have the time, and we're still a fairly small team, and just in terms of 55 companies. And so, but we try to stay on top of everything. I do feel like I have companies, like one just called me while I was doing this with you. So they're calling all the time for everything, and I love it because I like staying close to it, and sort of I like to keep an eye on what our money is doing, etc. Sure. But we try to be helpful. I think there's a type of investor who is involved and not helpful, and then we know what our strengths are, which is like marketing and PR and getting products out there. We're very helpful with hiring, and we're very helpful with fundraising. And so those are our three major strengths. And while we try to help with everything else, we try to stay focused on those categories. And then when I do take board seats, I make sure that I can add value to that company. And I usually set it up so I can roll off at a certain point But also when I realize I'm no longer adding value, and they feel like they're set up to really rock, I will roll off as well.
Interesting. No, that's cool that you are willing to do that, because some investors are definitely not, right?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. There are a few boards that I sit on that I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know how we get you off, but maybe we should.
Yeah, no, fair enough. That I love the honesty. I think that's no, no. To be fair,
But I think people may feel that way about me too. It's like you want the best board you can, but I think ultimately what everyone needs to be doing is supporting the CEO. And as an investor, I'm always looking at the greater trends, and the macro trends in terms of what's working for a business. And I feel like that's what I always try to point out is like, hey, the numbers aren't reflecting market, or hey, we need to like cut costs here because you're spending a lot here and that typically doesn't work. It'll implode if you don't change this. And so I think you just try to be as helpful as you can, but it's hard to be a board member. It's really, really hard. And I think people don't realize like everyone today is like, how do I get on boards? How do I get on boards? And I'm like, that is so great. You want to get on a board. Let's think about what your strengths are and then figure out how to make yourself appealing to that company and why you'd be a fit, because you need to bring a lot to the table. And also most of the boards I sit on, it's like you want to be friends with the founder, but as an investor, there's this divide, but then as a board member, there's a real divide because you're the one who has to turn the mirror around and say, hey, look, you're not doing so well. And I'm going to point out all your flaws up close and personal. And it's really hard. I've had some really tough moments on boards and tough conversations, both in companies doing poorly and companies doing incredibly well, And you like, I don't know, some days I'm like, I'm just embodying bad cop, and this is their baby. So they take it very personally. Every single founder says things to me like, we can't cut our head count. I can't operate with that few people. And I'm constantly like, but you can. I assure you, you can. And, they take it so personally. Sometimes there's low blows, and you just have to be this like bulletproof investor, friend, confidant, but really you need to look at it as like you have a fiduciary responsibility to your investors and the investors in the company. And so you need to watch out for that money. And so that's what you have to do. You're not there to be their friend.
Sure. But I also think too, eventually majority of those people figure out that you had their best interest at heart, especially when you come out of a tough conversation, like they need to downsize or do something differently, or they're not doing so well. I think it's coming from a place where you're actually really caring and trying to help them out, right? And I think eventually most people figure that out. Do you agree with that?
I hope so, but
okay.
I do feel like they're so close to it.
Okay.
And what I found with founders in general, and just, this is my own personal data collection, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. They see their company and maybe a little bit of their industry, but they don't see anything else. And so I have to point out things to them like, hey, I know you thought you were this like beautiful, unique butterfly, and I think you are, but you need to grow faster because look, you weren't even aware of these 5 other companies doing the exact same thing. Right. So how are we going to stand out and continue to grow? And it's funny because they can't sort of see beyond, it's like they're seeing inside their box because they're working their butts off and they're grinding and they're trying to make this thing happen. But often they don't get out and see the macro picture, which is what I think venture capitalists in general are very good at, is identifying those trends and knowing, okay, hey, based on the market and this industry, there's a lot of opportunity to sell now. In a year, this is going to be very different. Maybe we should sell this company now. And I think you think about things like that and you think about, okay, they're blowing so much cash. How do we pull it back and you tell them they have to cut half their headcount. And I think you're right. Like down the road, they'll thank you. But in the moment,
For sure. Yeah.
It's like peeling away their first child. And it's like every founder says the same thing. And then they like try to like go through your resume and tell you why you're not qualified enough to make these decisions. And you're like, actually, I sold 5 companies just like this already. So I'm aware of how this works. And, you know, it's so hard. I think these are things that people, wow, I didn't expect to like be so intense and personal about this, but I think it is really hard to be a board member. And I think it's important as an investor, like especially if you have a large investment in there or they're young founders and need to be held accountable. I mean, there's a few real reasons you should sit on the board, but it's like, I think that's what people need to realize is like, if you like the founder and that's why you want to sit on the board, that is not the reason, because you are not going to be there for that when they're running out of money.
That's actually really good advice, though. Like, I think a lot of people think of it as like, I'm just helping out a friend and this is going to be awesome and we're going to be super successful and everybody's going to be happy. But you're right. Like, yeah, I think a lot of people go in with kind of rose-colored glasses sometimes being a board member. So I'm glad you're being brutally honest about it. I love that. I think it's great because not a lot of people are, right? It's surprising.
Yeah, or maybe like right now I'm on some boards that I'm like, this is grueling.
Maybe. But I'm curious, you mentioned you guys are good at like marketing and PR. How do you guys help your investments with that stuff? Do you have internal team that helps with that? Do you recommend agencies they work with? Do you help them hire internally or how does that work?
All of the above.
Okay.
We also have great relationships. We're based in LA. I come from media. We have a huge press list that we're very close with. We also have great marketing strategies that we can flesh out for people. We're very, we have a whole sort of influencer incubator where we have great relationships and we can kind of organically plug them in. So any which way to get a product out there, we really try to be the most knowledgeable about that. And so, based in LA, it's like, this is the best place for consumer technologies in general, because if you have a great product, there is so much opportunity to get it out there. So we really try to stay plugged in terms of press all the way to celebrity partnerships and just try to kind of like, keep our finger on the pulse in terms of new marketing techniques. Interesting.
And I've heard a number of years ago, and I wonder if it was ever true, and is sure, like obviously Silicon Valley has a ton of companies, but in LA, there's a lot more people basically trying to generate income as fast as possible, where I think in Silicon Valley, it's, well, we'll figure out the revenue model or the monetization model a bit later, where like I've heard in LA, people seem to try to monetize faster and it's more top of mind. Is that fair to say, or just based on your previous comment?
I hope that's true.
Okay, fair enough. So
I do. It's funny because I feel like yesterday someone told me about some company in San Francisco that they were like, they've been at it for 3 years. They have like Excel as an investor and they still don't have a product. And I'm like, what? Like, how did they even get Excel to invest?
Sure.
And so, I look at it like that where, yeah, I do think in terms of, well, there are some cases where I understand why investors invest pre-product and pre-kind of business model,
Sure.
which would be maybe they're a second-time founder and they had a big first exit and you trust that they'll figure it out. And you just want to keep betting on that same, team or what have you. But I do believe like you best have a business model in the beginning.
Sure.
I like to see how you're going to make money.
No, 100%.
And I think there's opportunities like data companies that sometimes take a lot longer to kind of like flush out the business model. But I do think, I think in LA, well, because it's consumer probably,
Sure.
there's usually, that's a very simple model. You sell something, you sell a product to a consumer. Sometimes you also sell B2B, and that's really the dream.
100%. So you mentioned earlier you'll invest kind of across the country. Do you expect your founders or the team to actually move to California, or do you not care? Or what are your thoughts on?
No.
Okay.
No. And, I think I just want to make sure that they're all under one roof and working hard wherever they are. And, we travel a lot too. So we'll go visit them and they'll come visit us. So I think, no, you can be wherever. We invest wherever.
Sure. Well, and I also think too,
domestically, we haven't gone international yet.
Okay. No, that was going to be my next question to you, but I'm curious then. I think it's also just that there's so much talent outside of the Valley and Los Angeles that it probably gives you almost a bit of an edge too, that you can, in the middle of the country or somewhere else, maybe that's not known as a tech hub, they still have a lot of really good talent, right? And maybe that team is spread out in 4 or 5 different states, but trying to potentially get them all to move to California may or may not even be within the cards of those people that work there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that like wherever the team was, they were all, especially in the early stages, they should all be in the same place. But
Okay.
We've had situations like that where they're like, well, one of us is here, one of us is in another state, one of us is in another state, and we won't invest because in the beginning it's like you need to live and breathe this thing and all be together. And so I do want to make sure they're in the same city. However, they don't need to be in my city,
Okay.
And then when I think about investing across the country, like there is, when you invest in California, I mean, especially today, your money does not go as far as it will in other places in the country.
Right.
And the valuations are better in other places in the country. And, personally, in terms of investing my capital, I've been trying to get it out of California because
Interesting.
California is so expensive right now. So we actually are seeking cities across the country to find great talent and better valuations and, great technology. And I think there's a few things that go into it. That said, we do invest obviously the majority in California, but we're always like looking for new cities. And I think there's a few things that make a great tech ecosystem. And one is a university, and 2 is like one or a handful of corporations. And so you look across the country and, we have a great company in Atlanta. Coca-Cola is based there. We have, a company in Chicago, and, in Chicago, our money goes a lot farther than it would here, and the valuations are lower there. And those are just trends that we're seeing. They change by day, but those are things we definitely take into account. And I think, I encourage people to invest across the country for sure.
Sure. So if people actually want to pitch you guys, is there a specific way they need to do that? Is it just referral? Can they just email you? Walk us through that.
I think we are very accessible online. So you go halogenvc.com and you can fill out a form. You can find me on Instagram, Jessie C. Draper. You can, email me. You can LinkedIn message me. I mean, we are very, very accessible in terms of getting a hold of us. I try never to, referrals are great and I obviously pay attention to them, but not everybody knows me and I don't expect them to. And I think that everyone should have a fair shot in terms of getting investment for their company. So we look at everything from cold emails to referrals. And I think we try to kind of have a good random sample. We actually, call in 10 to 15 companies every 2 weeks to pitch. And sometimes these are people they were cold emails and we had a quick call with them, and we really try to meet with we try to give as many people a shot as we can because, the best companies, you never know where they're going to come from.
No, I think that's great because I do find some venture firms, there's this whole process and you need to be referred, and I'm not saying obviously people jump through those hoops to get to whoever they need to at that firm, but in some cases, when I emailed you, you emailed me personally back within a couple hours, and I was like, oh wow, I'm surprised. Usually it comes from an assistant, right? Days later. So just my own testimonial to you is you actually do get back to people, and you got back to me really quickly.
Oh, that makes me happy. I'm so sorry it took so long to do it, but I also have a real just soft spot for any talk show because I ran a talk show for so long, and it is so tough to get those guests. And so I always am like, I am happy to do it because I know how difficult it is to get great guests. And so I do always try to like make those things happen.
That's awesome.
Especially when people are just getting going and, have an idea for a show or whatever. So I think that is probably what caught my eye, where I'm like, oh yes, like you have a show, great. So I do always try to support because I come from media, and it's like such a process, as
Sure.
reaching out and booking and like crafting the conversation, which you're doing a great job, by the way, if you wanted feedback.
I appreciate that, but no, that's awesome. It's cool, right? Because it does help when you interview people like yourself that have actually done it or are still doing it. Because yeah, you're right. There's a bunch of challenges around this that people don't really realize. But I really want to maybe cover a few companies that you have maybe recently invested in, or you want to talk a little bit about, just to kind of close out the show.
Yeah, I mean, we have great companies. I'm really proud of our founders. They're incredible. We invest in, we have consumer technology companies from fashion all the way to healthcare. And we have a great, something I'm excited about right now is we have this great transportation company called Hop Skip Drive. They started as sort of like an Uber type service for families and childcare, but it's different. It's the only service that fingerprints their drivers, so they're much safer, and they can transport children, and you can schedule it, and so it makes carpools and things like that much easier, and that's going great. It's all over the West Coast, and
Smart.
they then launched they really got me thinking differently, because Joanna, the founder, is an incredible woman, and she built this great business, and the LA City foster care system reached out to her and said, hey, we'd love you guys to provide our transportation for the foster kids in LA.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so they launched this account with the LA foster care system, and it's a large account, and it's really exciting to work with them. And they've since launched 10 cities across the country doing the same thing.
Wow.
Now, providing transportation for foster kids is so important, and it's government provided. These kids cannot even attend an event where they might, learn something or see a speaker, or they can't attend any event unless they have government provided transportation. And so they now are able to provide that for them in a safe way. And there's other cool things, like in LA, you're stuck in traffic all the time. Sometimes kids, as devastating as it is, foster kids will be split up and put into different homes, but they have a rule now that they have to continue to attend the same school if they're siblings. So with Hop Skip Drive, they can also coordinate transport of siblings together to school, which is it's just like an important thing, clearly keeping families together.
Sure, totally.
And so I love companies like that, one, they're solving a government inefficiency, and two, they're making an impact, and three, they're making a ton of money.
That's
and
awesome.
That makes me really happy. And so I started thinking about the government as a customer. The government is a bigger customer than the Fortune 500 companies combined, and it's so inefficient, and the technology exists to make it more efficient. So I'm really targeting companies now that can solve these government inefficiencies. This is one of many verticals we're looking at, but I see a real opportunity there in the next 10 years to, change something and make all of our lives more efficient. And so since then, we've invested in a company called Binti that's putting adoption, adding more transparency to adoption and foster care online, and helping match families. And they've created this software to better match families. And I think, people don't realize, people think if you want to make an impact, you have to run a nonprofit. And I completely believe the opposite. I think there are opportunities for nonprofits. There's reasons to raise money for nonprofits. But I believe you can make a bigger impact as a for-profit company. And, you can figure out a sustainable business model and give back while you do it. And so now I'm actually targeting companies in not too highly regulated industries where the government can be a customer, and we can solve government inefficiency. And I hope to make all of our lives a little easier.
No, that's very cool. Those are amazing. But I'm curious then, would you ever come up with a business, and if none of the companies you guys have invested in, it's just not a fit for them, or they don't have time or whatever, would you basically put out a call for a founder to say, hey, we want to start this. Are you guys interested in that? Have you ever thought about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, one of those falls within this government thing. I have been dying to create a police report app where you and I can fill a police report out on an app, and it plugs into all the police departments, and we help source, basically data for the police. Like, we help solve crimes that they don't need to be on the street for, such as credit card theft or what have you. It's like, if you see, or even like, okay, 3 people reported a robbery on this street corner, like, and there's multiple videos that are geolocated and like tagged. Like, the computer should be able to solve some of these crimes, because I think the police have a lot of other work to do and shouldn't be dealing with things like credit card theft, et cetera. So like, that's an example of something I've been looking for a long time and haven't quite found the one that's right. I have about 50 revenue streams that are opportunities for this particular app. And so send me those, everyone. Send me those.
No, that's amazing.
We would
love
incubate it.
No, that's interesting, because again, like, most VCs would be like, that's a nice idea. You come to us when you're making a ton of money, and then we'll put in money. It's like, well, then I don't need you.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I've been looking for engineers just to build it, because I feel like I don't have time, but we're really, as a VC, we're looking to solve problems.
Sure.
I think those are real opportunities, and there's so many issues within the government and the police. I talked to the chief of police in the Santa Monica Police Department, and she said that, I said, what kind of technologies are you using? And they really don't have a ton. They have cameras now on their on their uniforms, but they don't have technology like this, where you could kind of look up an address and be like, oh, weird, like, they've reported these 3 things, or there should be a better system for sourcing this information, because today we have the Ring camera, we have Nextdoor. I mean, these crimes can solve themselves, and we can create kind of a safer community. So I always think about like the Ring camera. I don't know if anyone has that, but it's it's a camera doorbell, and it, like, my neighbors and things have solved crimes because they saw that the same guy or woman, because I always am like, I don't know, there's a girl gang who robbed some store by us recently, but they saw that this one guy had robbed a couple houses within one community, and so then they were able to kind of like bring that to the police. But this should all be done automatically.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. But we're kind of coming to the end, so how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys, and any other link you want to mention?
Yeah, halogenvc.com, and then Jessie C. Draper on Instagram. And we're looking for great consumer technologies. There has to be a woman in the founding team of 5. We have 55 great portfolio companies, and we hope to invest in your next business.
Perfect, Jessie. Well, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, no, this was so fun. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com, and keep building the future.